Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our Doing Business in the Middle East webinar. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Ibtisam Laswad, and I'm a partner and the head of advisory in the regional financial crime department of Al-Tamimi & Company. Although usually during the IBA we would be meeting in person to catch up on what could conservatively be described as an eventful 12 months, it is still a pleasure to have you join us virtually in our offices for this event. We hope to hear from you, as many of you as possible throughout the next hour, and indeed for the rest of the IBA annual conference. When it comes to discussing the Middle East and the Middle East business climate, I'm sure I'm not the only one that has heard the phrase dynamic market on more than one occasion. Whilst we can all appreciate the effort to capture the exciting and diverse nature of regional conditions, this does not always translate into a clear impression of what it is like to do business in the Middle East. So what does it mean to be in a dynamic market? As someone who has spent many years in working in the Middle East region, I can tell you what it means from my perspective. It means being able to adapt to new stimulus, whether this is the UAE's accelerated adoption of digitalized services across the public and private sphere in response, for example, to the unfortunate health crisis that we have been all suffering from, or whether it is about Saudi Arabia's labor law amendments to boost and protect its expatriate workforce. It also means agile and responsive government and regulations. So recently seen in Qatar's complete overhaul of its anti-money laundering framework and the development of insolvency laws in several Gulf countries. But it also means resilience to stagnation and forces of decline, because we have seen the success in Egypt in terms of sustaining positive GDP and GDP growth despite the decline in the global markets condition, and also Iraq's initiatives to germinate the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So these are just, of course, a few examples of characteristics that we see in various guises all over the region. And during time when the entire world is visibly grappling with challenges that were previously unimaginable to us, like the global health crisis, as I mentioned, they are also the lifelines that keep us tethered to a positive trajectory, moving towards the ambitious visions that guide commerce, strategy, and law in our respective jurisdictions. Of course, appreciating the dynamism also requires an understanding that there is still a lot of change and progress in the pipeline. But if you have joined us today, I hope this means that you are interested in understanding both the existing dynamism, but also the future opportunities that typify the Middle East markets. So to make some brief introductions before we start, for those of you that are not necessarily familiar with Al-Tamimi & Company, we are the largest and leading regional law firm in the Middle East, based in 9 jurisdictions across the Gulf, Levant, and North Africa. And we have above 30 years of experience operating in our markets. So this means that we do not only have a deep-rooted specialism in our respective areas, but also an inherent passion for seeing our systems flourish and function as hosts for entrepreneurial activity from across the world. So today, I'm pleased to be joined by my colleagues Sam Al-Quda, our managing partner and regional head of corporate structuring based in Dubai, my colleague Hisham Al-Hamoud, corporate structuring partner based in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and my colleague Ayman Noor, partner and head of office for our outfit in Cairo, all of whom will be bringing their own on-the-ground insights to our discussion today. So we are hoping to have time, of course, for audience Q&A at the end. So please feel free to submit your questions at any time using the Q&A box, and we will get to them once we have gone through the initial points that we'll discuss now with our panel. So Samer, if you allow me, I would come to you first for high-level comments before we drill down into specificities of the Saudi and Egyptian markets, and looking at the bigger picture from the MENA perspective, and also, of course, including the UAE. So ultimately, when we talk about doing business in different countries, one of the primary metrics and measures that we use to judge a country's amenability to business is the flow of foreign investments. So that we start by giving an overall indication of the investment landscape. Can you tell us which countries in the MENA region are the most attractive in terms of foreign investments for foreign investors, potential foreign investors and companies, and why?
Thank you, Ibtisam. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you once again for taking the time to join us today. And I hope you find this webinar useful. It's quite a broad topic actually to cover in this short time, but we'll try to focus on the areas that we felt is relevant to you. The Middle East obviously is a region where we've been operating then for over 30 years, like Ibtisam had mentioned, and we've seen throughout the years many changes. In fact, all are pro FDI across the region. We've seen changes in the law that very much relax the statutory restrictions on ownership. We've seen many incentives from the government to attract foreign investment to the various countries. And those incentives obviously varied from one country to the other. I'll probably shed some light on in the UAE in particular and in Dubai where I'm based, although in my regional responsibility, I've also witnessed lots of developments across the region, and they're all positive and they're all competitive in terms of attracting foreign investment. So the UAE and Dubai in particular, they always positioned themselves as a hub for the region. They never actually looked at the UAE as a market per se, only for doing business in the UAE, because the UAE market, as you're probably aware, is a small market compared to other markets in the region, Egypt and Saudi, where Ayman and Hisham will address later on the larger markets. But when we started here in Dubai, companies were looking at it as a base for them to be able to support and service those other markets. What attracts the international investors to the UAE is the ease of doing business. And this is one area that the UAE is leading the way on. And it's one of the key areas that competes with other places in the region. If I were to name a few jurisdictions where we're seeing now a growth, I would definitely look up to Saudi and to Egypt for the growth in the next couple of years. We've seen a number of our clients expanding to those markets, and this is, in fact, one of the key drivers for us as a firm to grow to these markets. We are client-driven, and we're there to support our clients. And that was the main reason for us to grow to those markets.
Excellent. Thank you, Samer. Actually, it's a very interesting point that you have mentioned. And when we are talking about the performance indicators, and I'm sure our audience is keen to hear about those points, whether we look into doing business in the region, and in particular, I can mention the doing business in each of our respective jurisdictions that are published by the World Bank, etc. I mean, even though we know that those are indicators that are taken and looked upon from the domestic small and medium sized companies, and we have, of course, major clients that are multinationals, etc. But yet, the way those reviews are performed and the way they look at and they measure the regulations basically locally is a key component. And I think that we can say that they are not uniform for all sectors in every country. So what, in your opinion, Samer, what sectors are proving most popular, and where do you think the best value lie for foreign investors?
Sure, thank you, Ibtisam. Well, speaking of the government focus, at least, the last couple of years, there was a significant focus on key sectors like healthcare, education, and technology. And obviously now with the pandemic and the challenges that many of the sectors had faced, there is an increased focus on technology, on how to basically support the other sectors through innovation and digitalization. We've seen that growing in the UAE in particular. We've seen companies, basically newcomers to the region, coming in and opening shop here. And we've seen that basically expanding across the region. There were certain sectors that were booming at one point in time, but were hit by the pandemic, and we would see this shrinking in the next couple of years. But also we have seen sectors like logistics, like healthcare, and technology, like I mentioned, that are in the growth mood across the region.
Okay, but I mean, it's quite relevant because we do know that all these sectors you mentioned, I mean, they do also exist in other jurisdictions. So why, in your view, does the Middle East represent a compelling investment destination?
Well, probably if I would relate that to the earlier comment I made about the UAE being a hub, it's the accessibility of the UAE in general. It's be it the port, be it the airport. The UAE had built an excellent network of transportation means through Emirates and through the ports, and it has all what it takes for it to be the logistic hub, let alone obviously its geographical location and its accessibility to all the regions.
Thank you, Samar. Hisham, I will turn to you now and to the Saudi Arabian market, so that you can give us closer level insights for the Saudi market, which is never short of headlines when it comes to legal reform and business initiatives. And actually, there has been, as you know, I mean, obviously a lot of noise that has reached the international community about Saudi Arabia's grandiose plans to diversify its economy away from the oil dependency, but also to modernize its business culture. So the question is, from an investment perspective, how do you see these plans have materialized over the past few years? Because we are talking about attracting international investment and beyond trade, trade beyond oil. So can you tell us about this, please?
Yes, thanks, Ibtisam. Yes, indeed. In Saudi, we are embarking on a huge reform program under the Vision 2030 that is driven by His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince. The idea is to open up new areas of investment in the kingdom, expand beyond oil productions, and reduce our reliance on oil and gas industry. Empower youth, women, encourage innovation, attract more foreign investment, make the government, I would say, more efficient, to lead for creation of stronger and more efficient society. During the last, I would say, 5 years, yeah, there was this 2030, which with its initiatives, and they have been introduced a lots of opportunities that you may say before it was closed or not touched or not focused on. I'm referring to here specifically during the last 40 years or last 50 years, most of the investment were focused in the oil industry or perhaps consultation, and to an extent to the information technology side. Now there is more focus during the last couple of years into entertainment and tourism. The kingdom, during the last couple of years, we have seen a number of investors. They have invested a huge amount of money in opening cinemas, arranging for tourism attractions in the kingdom. The most known one is a huge city close to the capital, Riyadh, called Al Qiddiya. It's an entertainment city to serve the Riyadh city and the surrounding areas. We speak about millions of square meters to have a huge entertainment city, and I may say it could be the largest entertainment city in the kingdom. So where I see the last couple of years, the focus is in addition to the entertainment, tourism, and I see there is also a trend and ambition from the government to go and to attract more investors in clean energy, so solar power and this kind of clean energy to reduce the reliance on oil as a source of income and as well as a source of power.
Excellent. So as you said, most of the Saudi Arabia's reform is held up under the banner of Vision 2030, which, as most people know, is the country's ambitious strategy to overhaul almost all elements of its legal, business, and social system in the next decade. But can you tell us, I mean, have you seen and where do you see the Saudi government's biggest challenges to achieving its 2030 vision? Because it's, of course, not an easy project.
Yeah, well, as any ambition, goals, and targets, there must be challenges. Under Vision 2030, there are more than 500 initiatives and more than 360 KPIs, key performance indicators. So as you can tell, orchestrating these initiatives is complicated in itself. But in the same time, the execution of these initiatives and to monitor these initiatives is also not an easy exercise. Each government sector, each ministry has their own initiatives, has their own KPIs. Leading all of these sectors from different backgrounds is not an easy job. Sometimes the initiatives may cross each other. One sector, one of their initiatives is to create more jobs. The other one will reduce costs. So sometimes they clash. So how you lead all of this, it's not easy. So I see this as a challenge. On the other side, I think transforming anything or transforming the mindset as well, it's from running all of these organizations to be from a governmental way of operating to a more efficient. There's another challenge to my mind, which require, I believe, strong management, strong monitoring. Maybe one of the points I want to highlight here is the idea itself of transformation from a government body to a private type of sector, or you may say from running that organization as a government organization into a commercial way of operating such ministry or such organization or such sector. This is one of the challenges. And to complete my point here, I'm referring here specifically of the strong ambition of the Saudi government in terms of privatizing number of sectors. We're speaking about privatizing healthcare, privatizing education, privatizing transportation, etc. So yeah, there are challenges, Ibtisam. One of the challenges that I came across recently is one of the goals and one of the targets of the government is to make one of the Saudi cities in the scale of the best cities in the world to live in. So perhaps like 10 years ago, Saudi Arabia wasn't that much a place of living as a destination. Now, here is the target. Within 10 years, one of the Saudi cities might be in that scale of these best living cities in the world.
Excellent. There is actually so much happening in the region, so we are pleased to see those developments, of course. And actually, one of the most recent changes that I wanted to bring up before we move on to Egypt is the reform to labor law, because the abolition of kafala, or what we call the sponsorship of foreign workers, is, and you will comment on that, please, but is a seriously significant change to the Saudi labor market. And I think that, of course, for people willing to do business in the region or already doing business in the region, it does represent a departure for the models that are commonly held in other Gulf countries, including the UAE, where we have the kafala system, etc. But to different levels. So can you explain the objectives behind the labor law reform, and also I think the implications for both international businesses and expatriates?
Sure. Now, to speak about the objectives, we need to understand what is the current situation with the kafala/sponsorship. Now, any expat employee to work in the kingdom, he needs or she needs an employment visa. So that employee will enter into the kingdom by virtue of employment visa. He starts working of a certain employer who become his sponsor. Now, for that employee to change his employer, he needs the green light from his employer. So he's under the control of his employer. For that employee to travel outside the kingdom, he needs exit re-entry visa, and he needs the support from his employer. When he finish working and he wants to get a final exit, he needs an approval from his employer. Now, what is being proposed? What's being proposed, yes, for an expat to work in the kingdom, he needs or she needs an employment visa. But when he comes and enters into the kingdom, the restriction in terms of changing his job from an employer to another has been relaxed under certain rules. For getting an exit re-entry visa for that employee, it will be initiated by the employee himself as opposed to ask his employer to get an approval. If he wants to go for a final exit, he will or she will initiate that request by himself or by herself, as opposed to go to the employer asking him for this final exit or asking him for permission. So you can see there is a huge relaxation, and the main purpose of that, actually, it's one of the goals of the Vision 2030 is to attract talented. So the target is to make the Saudi market for those talented expats more attractive, more competitive, comparing with the international market for work. So yeah, that's in a nutshell what is being proposed as changes to the kafala system.
Thank you very much, Hisham. That was very interesting, and thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. Ayman, please, in Cairo, thank you for your patience, and you now have center stage to share your knowledge on the Egyptian market. So we can start maybe with one of the most remarkable trends that we are seeing coming out of Egypt, mashallah, which is the fact that even after the difficulties of the last year that have crippled economies across the world, we have seen Egypt being able to maintain positive GDP growth above 3% throughout 2020, mashallah, which whilst other countries fall into economic difficulty. Can you maybe explain the forces behind this resilience and how Egypt economic engine has managed to maintain forward momentum?
Well, thank you, Ibtisam. Touch wood that we have this positive GDP. We were targeting actually 7%, but with the COVID, we went down to above 3%, which is still a very good thing. As you know, Egypt has seen a turmoil and political instability from 2011 till 2013. And since the new regime has started its ruling, it has been very bullish about investment and development of Egypt. So we have seen the expansion of the Suez Canal. We have seen a huge development of the infrastructure regarding roads, energy. With 110 million population in Egypt, by far we are the largest Arab country in respect of demographic factor. There is a lot to do. So currently, we have mega projects that would push the GDP of any country very aggressively high up north, because we have a new capital city, which is a huge investment. You can imagine a new capital city with 10 million of inhabitants that will move out of Cairo mainly. We have new touristic cities. We have made changes to the laws and legislative reforms to all the investment-related, education-related, health-related laws that enable private sector and investors and FDI to come pour into Egypt. So all of these elements together with the will of the government, the president, the state to enhance and develop the country after let's say a setback from the previous regime and from the chaotic events that we had. This all drives Egypt to a positive GDP and to attract investors, and that's why we are seeing a lot of FDI into several sectors like healthcare, like education, like power and clean energy. The government has issued several bonds and different types of bonds. They were all oversubscribed into. So Egypt is really attractive, and if you put your money in Egypt, you always have 110 million people subscribing into the new investments. So that's why we are ahead, and we are the highest attractive FDI country in Africa now. So this explains it.
Excellent. And actually, it's very interesting because you talked about many positive FDI, many FDI positive and attractive points. But I mean, obviously, Egypt is not impervious to all challenges, and no doubt faces also its own unique challenges and obstacles to sustaining this growth. So can you tell us about the difficulties that Egypt will have to overcome this, and also potentially what traps the international business will need to be wary of if they are doing business in Egypt?
Well, like in Saudi Arabia, there are some challenges. In Egypt, there are some challenges still. Some of them are in the culture of the government officers, whereby they are not sometimes up to speed with the changes, with the legal reforms. Sometimes they are challenges related to security issues. Like, for instance, you know, the sensitive element of the Sinai Peninsula. So projects there get more scrutinized by the security agencies in Egypt. So this makes processes much longer, and we have delays. We can see delays out of this. So mainly these are the challenges that we are still facing. We had hurdles before with respect to investments. These have been overcome by the legislative reform. For instance, you had a chairman of a company that would be personally liable to prison if something goes wrong against the company. Now it's the active manager of the company. We have seen the easing of investment in Egypt with a sole shareholder company. We have seen a new bankruptcy law that has facilitated the exit of the investors within less than 2 months. Instead of previously less than 2 years duration. We have seen reforms of the railway laws allowing the private sector to invest and operate public utilities, which was something like sacred for Egypt only the government was operating public utilities before. So there are challenges still, but we are seeing them overcome with legislative amendments and reforms.
Okay, thank you, Ayman. And actually, from your perspective on the ground, what would be the sectors that you believe or you have seen as being thriving, but also based on your personal practice and experience? I mean, being a lawyer and advising clients, whether we are talking about local clients, regional clients, or clients from other jurisdictions around the globe, what changes do you think are in the pipeline for businesses operating in Egypt?
Well, a very optimistic change is the digitalization of Egypt. So fintech companies and fintech companies are not regulated now in Egypt because there is a loophole in the legislation between the Central Bank of Egypt and the Financial Regulatory Authority. So this is a space for investors to come and fill in as soon as possible, and then they can comply with the new laws. 110 million Egyptian nationals are living in the country, and only 15% or 20% are or have bank accounts. So you can imagine the financial inclusion and what this will bring into the economy. Education is a major investment, attractive destination for universities to come and open up in Egypt, especially under the new Foreign University Campus Law. Healthcare, of course, it's 110 million people, and the infrastructure in healthcare needs a lot of development still. So this also is a very attractive space for investors to come and fill in.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ayman. And before we move to the questions from the audience, one probably general question I wanted to ask you, because we have talked a lot about FDI today, but what about insights? And of course, for the benefit of the audience, and because we have people already doing business in the region and in this part of the world. So what about the insights, basically, for the businesses and entrepreneurs that are already in your respective jurisdictions? Can you each tell me, and I will start with Samer probably, can you each tell me what your countries are doing to support startups and SMEs in each of your country, please?
Thank you, Ibtisam. This is actually a very hot topic, to be honest, across the region. And I know for a fact that the governments are very mindful of the need to support SMEs in general. We've seen lots of initiatives that were kicked off by the government, be it lowering cost of doing business, some amendments to the procurement laws to support these businesses, and the relaxation of laws, like I mentioned in general, that would apply to SMEs and others. Particularly that the segment of SMEs is the largest. In fact, in one of the stats that I've seen a couple of years back, over 85% of businesses are actually SMEs within the UAE alone. And I'm sure the picture is actually very similar across the region. The challenge that is still there, and I don't think that it's been addressed yet, is the readiness of the local banks. And by locals, I mean the locally established banks, not necessarily local, it's international and local banks. Their inability to support businesses. We've seen a number of initiatives that had failed in extending finance to SMEs. But what is trending currently, and we're seeing that more and more, is venture capitalists coming to the region and basically injecting money in those new startups and trying to basically give them a kick to grow. And we've seen very successful transactions where those startups and SMEs being acquired by major players and been taken to the next level. So perhaps I'll leave it to Hisham and Ayman to comment from their perspective.
Yeah, we'll start with Hisham, please. Thank you very much, Samer. Hisham, what do you think about this?
Yes, thanks, Samer. I think Samer has described the position actually in Saudi. It's very similar to the one in the UAE. I would add in Saudi that the government is very, I would say, concerned about the SMEs to the extent that they have created a governmental organization, a governmental authority, just in relation to SMEs and how to organize SMEs and how to support them. What I can say for the time being, that there is like some requirements under the government procurement laws and regulations, whereby they put a condition that in a certain project or to a certain limit, you have to contract with, either a small or medium-sized type of company. So not everything goes to these huge companies, but it has to be a certain portion of the contract of the work has to go to the small or medium-sized enterprises. So yes, I think that's in a brief what is the position in KSA. And I think during the next couple of years, there will be more initiatives to support this kind of size of companies, I believe.
Thank you very much, Hisham. Ayman, what is it like in Egypt?
Well, in Egypt, the government acknowledges that SMEs constitutes a big part of the future of the economy in Egypt. And the Central Bank of Egypt is very bullish with the licensed banks in Egypt, whether local or multinationals, to finance and to dedicate part of their financing portfolio to SMEs. We have seen new law regulating SMEs, and still, like Samer mentioned, these are attempts. We are seeing de facto challenges, but I believe this will continue. The progress in this line of developing SMEs is progressing in Egypt, and we will see the positive results along the way.
Excellent. We'll now move to the question from the audience. And there are already a lot of questions, and I'm sorry if we are not able to answer all the questions today. But let's start with one question that was asked in relation to the regulatory framework. Of course, as lawyers, we assist our clients within the region and from outside of the region. And I think the question here is how supportive is the regulatory framework evolving to supporting the startup ecosystem? So it goes back to your point in the UAE, but also in the region overall. So have you seen an increase in terms of new regulations, etc., that would support what we have just highlighted to our audience today? Samer, you may want to start, or I mean, I leave it to one of you to decide.
Well, absolutely. I mean, like we've mentioned, and echo Ayman's point as well. It's very much moving in the right direction. What Hisham mentioned about the procurement laws is also valid for the UAE. There is a drive for ensuring that the SMEs companies are given an opportunity to participate on those tenders. So there is a percentage that is required in those procurement exercises. And we were very much seeing the picture improves day after day. Whether that will basically come to perfection anytime soon, it's yet to be seen, but it's certainly moving in the right direction.
You're on mute, Ibtisam, but I will.
Could you please comment?
Yeah, we have seen the regulators conducting workshops before issuing any laws or draft laws to the cabinet before the laws are promulgated or discussed at the parliamentary level before being issued by the president. So these workshops are really investment oriented, and they facilitate things rather than we have seen before 10 years ago, and more putting more challenges and more scrutiny to the government. On the contrary, the current regime is really facilitating things and boosting the free economy in Egypt.
Thank you very much, Ayman. Next question is relating to, I mean, again, the developments that we have seen in the region. During the last years, there has been a huge investment in the region in terms of infrastructure, so metros, airports, ring roads, etc., and also rails. So the question here is that whether, to your knowledge, there are any remarkable upcoming projects in civil works and infrastructure for the coming years in light of all the points that you have addressed today.
Well, in Egypt, we have monorail, we have trains, we have a lot of mega projects because, as I mentioned, there are new cities, and the government is trying to link these new cities with railway infrastructure. So at this level, Egypt is very busy with new projects in this regard. And as I mentioned, the amendment of the railway law has has made it possible for private sector to invest, whether on their own or in a joint venture with the government agencies in new projects concerning railway.
Thank you, Ayman. Samer or Hisham, you would like to add some points?
Yeah. Okay. What I think from Saudi as an observer here and as dealing with governmental authorities, I see there is, in terms of mega projects, the Riyadh Metro is almost will finish like sometimes in 2021. But this will also open other opportunities to serve the Riyadh Metro itself. In addition to that, as I mentioned earlier, the government is focusing on privatizing a number of sectors and or corporatizing a number of sectors. So yeah, there are huge projects alongside with these privatization projects. Something worth to mention as well. Now, just during the last couple of months and during the next 6 months, there is a seriousness from the government to open up a couple of cities, a couple of free zones or logistic zones in the kingdom. And one of the main purposes of these free zones and or logistic zones is to attract more investors with a certain caliber, a certain I would say background, a certain profile. So yeah, these what I see during the next 6 months, 1 year from now. Sorry, Samra.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Hisham. Another very interesting question in relation to, I mean, of course, doing business and how people look into these markets considering risk factors as well. So it's not just statements for us to make in terms of you can come and the investments would be safe. It's also giving the necessary level of comfort for whoever is willing to do business in this part of the world. And one of the key questions which has been also asked right now, and thank you for that, is for people to understand or get some background on how companies, either local or foreign companies operating in the UAE, perceive the effect of extraterritorial laws of the United States, such as the FCPA, and is the UAE federal government showing interest in prosecuting corruption cases in the region by influence of international efforts to do so? I mean, I'm happy to answer this question considering that it's very financial crime related, and you can inject, of course, colleagues in terms of what you would like to highlight. I think it's a very topical question and an interesting one, because ultimately whoever is willing to enter this part of the world and invest, make any investment, whether it's a joint venture or otherwise, would definitely look at the risk factors, and one of which is the corruption index, and that's why people are very familiar, I'm sure, with the Transparency International Corruption Index and the rankings, and those are the indicators that people would look into. So if I stick to this question now, in terms of how the UAE in particular has been looking into the effect of foreign legislation, one point that I would like to make, which is relevant in my opinion, is the fact that historically, of course, understanding the concept of extraterritorial applicability of extraterritorial laws was not an easy one, because we are in the Middle East, we are far away from the US, from other jurisdictions. So the concept of having legislations that are issued in some jurisdiction, but that would still have the long arm and being able to have some consequences was not something that people were understanding. But then, of course, things have evolved, and with the globalization, etc., it became clearer, and the openness of the countries where we operate, it became clearer that was something that could not be ignored, but also the actions taken by the authorities. So, for example, if we are talking about the investigation on corruption in the US, so as a result of that, of course, it's clear, and it's a must say for me to tell you that the UAE government and any government in this part of the world are looking into these topics very seriously. Corruption by itself it's a zero tolerance in those markets, and historically, if you look at the actions taken by the authorities, we have had situations where, many individuals were involved in corruption, but that was up to the highest levels and involving ministers, etc. And that's not something that has been ignored, and actions and legal actions were taken. So the extraterritorial laws that do exist and the applicability is something taken very seriously. That is being prosecuted. And also, on the other hand, I need to say something else, which is we have this situation where sometimes there have been settlements in one jurisdiction, let's say the US, with the authorities. However, that settlement by itself doesn't mean that there's no potential liability from a UAE or Saudi or Egyptian criminal perspective, because this is what the local authorities and the institutions in the region would also investigate. If there have been violations on their soil, this is also something that they will look into. So I'm sorry it was a long response, but I think it's one worth mentioning for people doing business and understanding the state of mind when we do business in this part of the world. I don't know if Ayman, Samer, or Hisham, you wanted to add anything in relation to that?
I actually wanted to, and I know, Tissam, that your team is very active in advising clients across the region on corruption. And this is a key area that foreign investors want to learn more about when they decide on where to do business and the size of the investment that they make in a particular jurisdiction. So if you could just shed some light on other jurisdictions. I know that you've covered UAE in particular, but how would you rate the jurisdictions across the region, and how would you rate the region in general when it comes to corruption?
So I think it's fair to say that, look, we mentioned that we are talking about a very dynamic market, and a market that is moving very fast and willing to attract investors. With that, there's always, some fine line that one has to keep in mind, because on one hand, we are willing, of course, and keen to attract investors. On the other hand, I mean, you do not want to disturb the ability, of course, to ensure that the laws are respected in the region, whether we are talking about Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt, and also all the jurisdictions where we operate. So to give you an example, we want to have people come and set up businesses in the region. And of course, there are like different type of free zones, like we have the commercial and the financial free zones, which is a very well-known characteristic of the UAE's economy, for example. But we also know that in Saudi Arabia, we are also planning to have new free zones in Saudi Arabia. So the free zones by themselves, on one hand, is a huge opportunity for people to do business. On the other hand, as we know globally also, unfortunately, we have seen situations where it has been used by criminals to try to hide behind the setting up of entities and without disclosing the ownership, etc. But for any problem, there is a solution, and we learn based on experience and on potentially mistakes, if we can call that mistakes. But we learn also from experience, because we are really keen in this part of the world to develop whatever has not been developed or what was not developed sufficiently, and to ensure that, you know, those are tackled, because that's something that would definitely assist developing the investment that we have seen. So that's why we have seen new set of laws, whether in the UAE, in Saudi, and in Egypt, but also actions taken. And as you probably read in the newspapers, there's not one day where you wouldn't read a case that has been handled by the authorities, whether we are talking about corruption, money laundering, and other things like that in terms of financial crime. So I think the world is not perfect. And I'm talking about the world to the global at the global level, and at each and every level, we are trying our best to develop and help develop the necessary set of regulations. So going back to the question about, like, for example, the free zones and the misuse of the free zones, that is very well aware. There have been recently a cabinet resolution, for example, that relates to the beneficial owner procedure. So there are really steps being taken, and I must conclude by saying that there are a lot of misconceptions, unfortunately, generally speaking, and it's important. It's for us to make sure that these misconceptions that do appear in different type of reports, etc., are not left unanswered, and we cover those by taking the necessary actions and by having really active markets that would attract the investors, but provide the necessary level of confidence. So that would be in a nutshell, I think, what I wanted to highlight.
Yeah, I can agree more with you, Ibtissam. I mean, to your point, I would echo that point, that the government had been very active in enacting laws that would boost the confidence of foreign investors in the market. And you mentioned the beneficial owner regulations that were passed recently, and not only passed, but enforced across all the regulatory bodies across the UAE. And we've seen also the economic substance regulations that came to support the credibility of the market. And this is probably also applicable to Saudi and Egypt. That's what is trending these days.
Yep. Did you want to comment, Ayman and Hisham? No. Can you hear me? Sorry, maybe some glitch here.
No, I can hear you, Ibtissam. Yes. Well, I think it's just like the position in Saudi is very similar to the UAE, with the current legal reform in the kingdom, enacting many laws and regulations to combat any corruption and create more confidence. And perhaps I may not comment on this particular point about the most recent changes in the laws and regulations that make the FDI is by far easier and more straightforward than it used to be 10 years ago. 10 years ago, if you ask for a foreign investment license, it's easy to say it will take a couple of months with a huge amount of documents in terms of requirements. Now it's just like they minimize it to a couple of documents, and it may take just basically the foreign investment license itself. There will be other requirements, but for a foreign investment license, it may take just a couple of hours or a couple of days. So yeah, it all goes just to make the kingdom more attractive, easy friendly or friendly environment, legally friendly environment for foreign investors.
Thank you, Hisham. And actually, to add to your point, and just to give some statistics in terms of the cases we have seen in Saudi Arabia, and like Nazaha, which is the anti-corruption authority in Saudi Arabia. They announced, I mean, throughout the last couple of months, it has been, I mean, daily, and they have announced huge numbers of cases. More than 105 different cases in July 2020, 218 different cases in August. It has been slowing down somehow in September with 45 only. But you see, I mean, we see that there is an increase. And it includes, like, of course, bribes, forgery, fraud. So really, the message is very clear to the international community, to the local community. And it's really a zero tolerance policy. So this is actually an extremely positive point. And hopefully, we'll see more and more in terms of, I mean, we are assisting with the corruption cases, obviously, but it's always a positive thing for us to see in terms of developing the region and of course tackling any issues that have been raised in the past.
I agree with you, Pisam. I agree with that point specifically. And one of the ways or the factors that the government took into consideration is to digitalize the whole kingdom, the whole system. So let's say 10 years or 15 years ago, if you want to do an application, it was manual, and there might be some corruption happening with these manual applications. Now everything is digitalized, it's easy, you get it faster, and you avoid any chance of corruption, if I may say. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, one potential last question, and I'm sorry because we will be short of time, unfortunately. I mean, we can go on and talk about these topics, and we are very passionate, as you can see. But I have one last question potentially for you, Ayman, on Egypt. One question that relates to the requirement, you know, would doing business in Egypt require a local partner? If you could shed some light on that for our colleague who asked that.
Well, in general, thank you. This is a major difference between Egypt and GCC countries. We have not seen laws requiring local partners, except in limited events like agency, for instance, agency law, or to register yourself as an agent in Egypt, you need to have a 100% local constituent and local partner. So even if you have a company with multi-tier structure, and they trace it to the ultimate beneficial owner, so you need to be 100% Egyptian. Importation was the same, but now it's more lenient because it requires the importer or the importation company to be owned 51% by Egyptians and 49% by non-Egyptians. But there is, of course, a structure that would enable a multi-layer structure that would allow an ultimate beneficial owner to have control 100% over the whole operation and the whole structure. There are other requirements with respect to under the Financial Regulatory Authority for specific companies to have an Egyptian component or an Egyptian element or a majority Egyptian element. Certain, as I mentioned earlier, certain investments in Sinai, they would not be lenient to see foreign investors or majority-owned foreign entities. Real estate properties to be owned by foreign nationals has a limitation. It is you can own a property just for the ownership, not as a tool for the performance of the activity of the company, but there are limitations as well. But we never had this kafil or kafala like in the GCC or the muwatin that or the national of the country that needs to own 51% and structure or have back-to-back agreements that would overcome this. We do not in our most of the business sectors in Egypt, you don't need to have Egyptian national as an owner in your company.
Thank you very much, Ayman, for this. And if I may ask you, my dear colleagues, to just probably provide some concluding remarks, like 30 seconds each. And of course, I mean, we have been, I think, hopefully as positive as we could be considering the current climate, but also really in total honesty in terms of what we see in our respective markets and hopefully the dynamism and what it will bring to the region. So if I can ask you each, and I will start with you, Samer, maybe like 30 seconds in terms of concluding remarks and what you would like to tell our audience today for them to be comfortable enough to continue if they are already doing business in the region, and also like some kind of message of hope and, you know, like positivity.
Well, I guess the conclusion that can be drawn from the webinar is that the region still has lots to offer. It's still in the growth mode. There are lots of opportunities despite all the challenges. We always say with challenges comes opportunities. So it is still a dynamic region. It still has a lot to offer, and we're here to support you. I hope that we've managed to give you a bit of color to how things are at the region, and we look forward to hopefully answering any follow-up questions that you may have on any of the specific points that we've addressed. Thank you very much once again for joining us today.
Thank you, Samer. Hisham, please.
Yes, well, I think Samer has covered it properly. Yes, from as a conclusion, yes, it is. There are lots of opportunities in the region. I think there is a developing countries, or sorry, developing economies, in the sense that there are many sectors. There is a huge gap of improvement, and there is a huge gap. There is a huge opportunities, and we are here to support, knowing the market very well, dealing with all relevant authorities to facilitate and make the investment much easier, more practical, and yeah, safe for our clients.
Thank you very much, Hisham. Ayman, please.
Thank you for attending, of course, and we're really eager to help you with your investments in Egypt. And there are a lot of opportunities, as we mentioned throughout the webinar, and of course, there is a lot to explore in Egypt.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Samer, Hisham, and Ayman. That was very interesting, and I'm glad that we were able to have this webinar today. That's all for the time that we have today, unfortunately. But thank you, everyone, for joining us, and to those of you that contributed your questions and comments. We hope that you enjoyed the rest of the International Bar Association virtually together annual conference. But we also hope to see you, some of you, in the real world very soon, once we have some closer semblance of normality with our traveling schedules, which I think we all miss. And for now, stay safe, and we wish everyone the best. We remain at your disposal if you have any questions and follow-up questions. Please feel free to reach out to any of us. Thank you so much, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.